Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Calling All Creatures. And I am your host, Lori. Most of you probably know that by now if you've been listening for like the last 6 years. But for those of you that are new, I'm your host, Lori. And tonight we have a really good podcast. I named this one Masked and Mischievious. And if you can't guess what we're talking about off of that, I don't know what to tell you. So yes, we are talking about raccoons tonight because I think they're really cool animals. And yes, they're cute and they're fun, but there's other things people need to know about them. So we're going to talk about them tonight with Sarah Holmes Bookbinder. She is the executive director of the Charles M. Gordon Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, and that's a mouthful. But that's awesome. I read about why you actually named it, but we'll talk about the center here in just a second. But Sarah, thank you for being on the show tonight. I appreciate it, and maybe we can get started with you just telling us a little bit about yourself, about, maybe about why you like raccoons and what makes them kind of special to you, and then we'll just kind of get into talking about them.
Sure, and thank you so much for having me. It's been really exciting to have somebody interested in talking about raccoons. It's my favorite thing to talk about, and they are fabulous animals, so I'm grateful whenever I get the chance to talk to people about them. So let's see a little bit about me. I was growing up kind of a very introverted, shy child, as I think many animal people are, and I was much more comfortable around all the feral cats and the animals in the neighborhood than I was around the people. And I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia, and really one of the only wildlife species that I had exposure to was raccoons, and they used to come and put their little hands in my kiddie pool, and I would see them out my window at night, and so I really was drawn to them from a young age. I recently found a piece of paper in my dad's belongings that was part of the, quote, great American novel that I wrote at age 8, and it was called All Raccoons Are Cute, and it was a very cute little drawing of raccoons, so I think they've always been there in my world. But when I decided that I wanted to become a wildlife rehabilitator, I went to do a mentorship at another facility that was sort of a generalist, and I love all animals, and I was expecting to sort of become a generalist as well, and I went and I worked with my first raccoon, and I had this experience. It was a little juvenile, and I went to feed it, and it recognized that I wasn't the person that normally fed it, and it turned its heads, and our eyes met, and I honestly felt like I had been electrocuted. Like I had never felt such intelligence coming from an animal, and the way it was looking at me, it was just one of the most magical experiences I've ever had. It just took my breath away, and I think between that and it reached out its little hand, and between those two moments, it just basically everything stopped. My whole path to my future changed. My savings account rapidly diminished. Everything went out the window, and I said, okay, well, I was doing all these things with my life, and now I'm just going to be working with raccoons and doing everything I can to save them. So that's sort of my introduction to raccoons, and fortunately I am married to a veterinarian who shares the love of the species that I do. He also somehow, we managed to find each other in the universe as these crazy. We were married long before I became a rehabber or we discovered raccoons, but we both really fell in love with them as a species, and we have pretty much just devoted our whole world to them at this point.
And that's really cool that you guys were able to, meet and actually do that. I know I was reading about your husband and being a veterinarian, so, and it works out so great because he can, work with you in doing what you both, love. So that's really cool.
Absolutely, and it's also a part that makes our center a little bit unique in that we do have also that veterinary piece of the puzzle. So in addition to the rehabilitation work, we're able to, do a lot of the medical care that's needed.
Right, because it's hard for a lot of, even regular dog, cat, domestic animal rescues, it's hard for them sometimes to find, a vet that's willing to work with them and help them out with their animals and stuff like that. So, and I know how hard it is with you guys as wildlife rehabbers because, I've had several on the show. I had a lady who does she's an opossum rescue. And, same thing. She's got a really great vet, that works with her. So, but yeah, it's awesome that you guys have that,
It really is. I mean, so many people accuse me. They're like, that was really smart to marry a vet like you. I'm like, well, the marriage came first. The growth came out. It was not some sort of strategic bond, but it did work out really well. And that is something that rehabbers really do struggle with. Finding a vet, and they're all in short supply. And then certain species, even the Wildlife Hospital at Cornell University down here won't treat raccoons or, things that are defined as rabies vectors. So if you have a raccoon, anybody basically in New York that, calls Cornell and says, I have an injured raccoon, they basically say, bring it to the bookbinder. So there are a very small handful of veterinarians that are willing to help out their rehabbers with these species around in this state anyway, and that's really too bad because they, rehabbers are putting all their heart and soul and money into this work, and, they really need that medical support. So that's been one of our things that we really try to do. I mean, we've had people drive raccoons, 10 hours in a day to bring them into us for help because they can't get anybody else. That's part of the outreach that we're trying to get started here, is to try to encourage and inspire more of our local veterinarians to start working with their rehabbers more.
Right. And since you touched on it, I was going to ask you about this anyway. Do you know why it is that there's so few vets that'll treat raccoons? Is it because of the rabies vector? Is it something else? Is it just... what?
I think it's probably a combination of things. There was a sort of a, like, I don't know if you call it an old wives' tale or what you'd say, but there was sort of some misinformation that went around the state a while ago that put the idea in everybody's head that veterinarians can't treat wildlife, that they need a special, something special on their license. Widely populated, that was not accurate. So we're trying to sort of dispel that myth that, a veterinarian in New York State is able to work on any animal. So that is part of it is probably also that there is a shortage of veterinarians in general in our region. So they're already more than overworked with their domestic animal load. And I also think there's probably an intimidation factor. I mean, a lot of veterinarians don't really haven't really talked to a lot of their rehabbers, so they don't realize that, like, the rehabilitator will help them. They will restrain the animals so that they don't have to put their technicians at risk. They will, share all their knowledge and their resources and their textbooks, and, rehabbers are really there. They need this help, and they will do anything that they can to make the veterinarian more comfortable. I think there's also there's a perfectionism in veterinarians, of course, that they want to only do good and never do any harm, and so they're afraid to maybe work with a species that they don't understand that well. So maybe they're a bit intimidated, and I think, what they need to sort of start to understand is that that animal's not going to get any help if they're not willing to try. So as a veterinarian, they are at least better, we're all kind of making a lot of this up as we go and learning as we go, so they're better poised than a non-veterinarian to at least sort of take a stab at what might help a situation. And rehabbers also often just need, basic medications and help with, antibiotics and pain meds and euthanasias and things like that. So there's a real need.
Well, yeah, and I hate to say this, but because I'm sure there's heard me say this 100 million times, because I did animal control for the amount of time I did, you can get the pre-exposure rabies shots too. Now, is it fun to get that hemoglobin one because it's got to go around the area where you get bitten? No, it's not fun. But again, you can get at least the first 3 shots ahead of time, and then if you do happen to get bitten, then it's just those last 2. And you don't,
Well, and I would hope that most veterinarians and their staff are vaccinated.
You'd be surprised at how many are not.
I don't know about the staff. For New York State raccoon rehabbers, it's required to have our vaccination series. So in order to work with raccoons, we are required to be vaccinated. So we have our shots. So, one of the things that I tell rehabbers if they're going to be working with raccoons is I encourage them to buy a squeeze cage so that, they could actually say, sometimes veterinarians, I think, are also worried about maybe bringing in wild animal diseases into a domestic practice or something like that. They're putting their clients' animals at risk, things like that. So I have actually encouraged, I teach at the state conference every year, and I have encouraged all the rehabbers who handle raccoons to purchase a squeeze cage, which is basically just like like an animal trap or a cage, and you put the animal goes in there, and then you can actually push the side of the cage so that you can administer a shot through the cage, so no one can get bitten, the animal can't get out. It's very safe, and we actually, once rehabbers have gotten those and they can have these conversations with their veterinarians, they can say, can you bring the sedative out to the parking lot? I've got the animal in my trunk of my car in a squeeze cage. Can you sedate the animal and then bring it in for x-rays once it's, knocked out, things like that, so that it eliminates a lot of the risk and the concerns. And I think if you can just, veterinarians are overworked. It's a terrible field right now. They're as burnout as the rest of us in the field, and they're overextended. But, if you can have a very kind, diplomatic, open conversation with your vet and say, I'm trying so hard to help these animals, is there any way you could help me at all? I'll pay for it, or however they want to work it out, but try to figure out what that thing is that is causing their reservation. If it's just that they don't want to handle it, or whatever, that's obviously up to their discretion. But if it's something like they're afraid of their staff getting hurt, or they're afraid of bringing it into their clinic, there are ways that you can mitigate those situations. So we're just trying to sort of open some of those discussions.
And the thing is if you have a vet that works with some of these cat rescues and even larger shelters that do TNR, that's what they're doing with the ferals. They're getting them in a squeeze cage.
Absolutely.
To bring them in to sedate them so they can, fix them and give them rabies vaccinations and then put them back out into their colonies. So, that's just, so they're already, a lot of them are already very familiar with the squeeze I can't even say it, squeeze cage, and how it's, used for those instances. So yeah, and you're right. I can understand the zoonotic thing too, but yeah, if you do have the animal in the cage and it never touches the floor, and then after you're done with the exam, whatever's happened, then you take it back out, and then they, bleach and disinfect that area, they should still be good. So
absolutely.
So there's not really, if you can have good conversations with your vet and talk to them about doing that, then that's awesome, because there shouldn't be too many reasons. I don't know, I know you're in New York and I'm in Arizona, and I don't know what exactly any of the laws or requisites or what a lot of the vets here, I don't know if very many of our domestic vets where I live actually work with any wild animals or not. We do have a wildlife rehab center, though, but it's about an hour away from me. So, but yeah, if we get something, there's a lot of times we can run it up to them.
That's great. Yeah, I know that the regulations, vary dramatically from state to state. I teach raccoon rehab. I've taught in Mississippi and Massachusetts and Connecticut and all different areas, and it's so funny because I'll go into some and I'll be like, okay, so what are your vaccination requirements? What are your caging requirements? And and some are like, none. And some are just like, well, we got to do this. I'll send you the 47-page booklet, So it's all, it really varies a lot from state to state too. So.
Yep, exactly. So, just throw it out there. If anybody listening is thinking about being any kind of a wildlife rehabber, check with your state that you're in to see what your local laws are, or what your requisites are to try to become a wildlife rehabber. It's like when I mentioned the possum rescue. She's in, let's see, it's Tennessee. It's one of those states, Tennessee, Virginia, one of those. Could even be Kentucky, but it's one of those, in that area. And it's really hard to get the permit and stuff to rehab the possums. And
Sure.
yeah, I mean, she was talking about it when I had her on the podcast. So it's really hard for them too, and there's not a lot of them in that around allowed to do that. So so definitely check with your state on what you need to know, the laws, the requisites, and stuff like that, and find out if you can even do it. So because some states really do prohibit that kind of stuff. So, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the Charles and Gordon Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. So what is it that you guys do there at the center, and how did you get started and get going?
Well, you can shorten it just to Gordon Wildlife, so that's slightly less of a mouthful for you there, but so we are a sort of a micro center based in central New York, and we are focused, we specialize in raccoons. So we, the main sort of nuts and bolts of what we're doing here is we are rehabilitating orphaned or injured raccoons that come into care. But as a sort of outbranching of that, that's what started as our mission, is we came to realize that there was a tremendous need for not just the veterinary piece, but also just like a central sort of networking and sort of morale boosting presence in the state, because rehabbers are kind of working in these isolated little pockets, and everybody was sort of reinventing the wheel and having to learn a lot of things the hard way on their own. And rehab is really amazing, difficult heart work. You're really, it's gut-wrenching at times. It's incredibly euphoric when it's successful, but you see a lot of really difficult things. And the people who are going into this, we're not allowed to charge for what we do. So they're all people who are doing it on a volunteer level. They're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts to be there for these animals. And it's just devastating when you are doing it sort of alone and you hit some of those really bad points, and some of the really hard stuff. You see a lot of animals that are in bad situations, largely because of people, and so animals come into rehab, and then you try your hardest, and often, it doesn't work, and you're not able to save the animal, or something goes wrong, and it can be really heartbreaking. So for all those triumphs and victories and amazing moments where you save something, you're often really devastated by the bad cases. So we're trying to also be sort of a mentorship and a networking, a sort of a haven for the different rehabbers to come together and, drink heavily. No, I'm just kidding. But, sort of be there for each other.
I know a lot of rehabbers. I wouldn't blame you guys.
So we try to just sort of be there. Paul is there to able to give the sort of veterinary backup. If people can send us something and go, like a text or a video, and say, what is this? Have you seen this before? What are you worried about? Rehab is a really fascinating field because it attracts people from all walks of life at all ages. Like, it's a great sort of undertaking for someone who's just retired because, they have maybe a little bit of expendable income, a little bit of time on their hands. They've been animal people. They love it. So people come at it from all different places in the world. So not everybody has a veterinary medical background, or, in New York State, you only have to really sort of take a test and get, for raccoons, get your caging inspected and a few things like that. But there's a sort of a need for some basic sharing of experiences and ideas so that we don't all have to keep learning things the hard way. So we really try to do that mentorship for others around the state. And last year, we launched our Baby Boot Camp program, which is a hands-on raccoon rehab training program, which we weren't really expecting to take off the way that it did. And we've had just people from all over the country apply, and it's a really unusual, apparently it's more pioneering than I thought, because we suddenly have a lot of applicants, but it's something that really trains people with the hands-on handling and protocols of how to really work with these animals. And it gives you sort of a backup so that you're not suddenly licensed and then animals are brought to you and their lives are in their hands and you don't know what to do, and it's all the pressure's kind of on you. So it gives them sort of a little back up to get their feet wet. And so that's a large part of what we're doing here is this sort of education, training, outreach. We're trying to help other people navigate the licensing process in our state. And we ended up actually writing our protocols manual, which has sort of somehow become the Raccoon Bible around the country. It's now been downloaded, I think, in something like 44 states and 13 countries or something. So we ended up kind of inadvertently writing the book on raccoon rehab, at least the starter version. So we're really just trying to get raccoons sort of seen in another light. I mean, they get vilified a lot, and we really just find them to be such magical and worthwhile animals that we really want to sort of be a force for good to make it better to be a raccoon in New York State.
Right.
But that's what I say. That's my bucket list. Before I die, I want to have made it better to be a raccoon in New York State. So sort of everything that comes out of that, the training and the outreach and the rehab itself and the putting out some more positive messages about them and things like that.
Well, it sounds like you're actually being a positive influence and helping out raccoons in a lot more than just your state and countries.
Yeah, I hope so.
Oh, my goodness.
They all deserve it.
Yeah, no kidding. That's amazing, though. I mean, that it's been shared out and around and to that many different places. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a complete shocker. I mean, I had no idea. I mean, I thought maybe we did it as a download at first, and I thought, maybe 20 people will want it, and I was basically making it for like our students as like a guide, so they could learn. And then all of a sudden, like people started, and then people were like, "Where's the printed version?" So this year we made it into a printed book, and now we've sold several hundred copies of that, and it was just like it's just crazy. We just weren't. I mean, raccoons do that to you. Like once one looks into your eyes and reaches out with his little hand, like you're kind of sunk forever. So like once you meet these raccoon people out there, and they're like, okay, we're our own little tribe, and like once a raccoon person, that's kind of it. So I get it, but I just kind of didn't quite know how many of them there were out there.
That's funny, but that's awesome. I mean, it's funny, but it's awesome. So, yay! So why don't you go ahead?
No, I'm just waiting for them to take over the world.
It's kind of like Pinky in the Brain.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, why don't you give us some more basic information about raccoons, like their diet, habitats, how long do they live, usually how many offspring do they have, those kinds of basic things that people may or may not know.
Sure. So raccoons are, people always say that they're nocturnal. They're actually crepuscular, so they're most active really at dawn and dusk. They are also active at night, but they really mostly go out at that dawn and dusk time. And I do want to clear up the misconception that if you see a raccoon out in the daytime that it's usually rabid. That is not true. If you see a normal acting and normal looking raccoon out in the daytime, particularly in the springtime, that is usually a mom who's out and who's hungry and who is... I can tell you, since I bottle feed a heck of a lot of raccoon babies in the spring, that they eat a lot and they eat all the time. So she is, leaving the kids in the den at night. She wants to be in there with them when everything else is out that she would see as a threat. So she goes out during the day to feed herself. Mm-hmm. So if you see a raccoon that's staggering or walking in circles or doing something really, that looks off, that's a different story. That's maybe a concern about a disease process. But if you just see a normal looking raccoon walking around during the daytime, particularly in the spring, chances are that's just a mom looking for some food. And speaking of their food, you did ask about their diet. So they're omnivores. They can eat pretty much anything. One of the things I really love about raccoons is probably a lot of the things that they get vilified for, but they are incredibly adaptable. So they've learned. You look at them and they're this kind of fat, waddly, incredibly unlikely animal to be as close to the top of the sort of food chain as they are, and they've just become so brilliantly adapted because of really their intelligence and they can eat anything. If we have a hard winter here, they could eat tree bark if they had to, so they can, survive. They'll eat meat, they'll eat anything, and they'll get through. They have adapted to, eat garbage if they have to, which is not what they want to do, but one of the reasons that people get frustrated with them. But again, these are things that I think actually make them more amazing, is that they have adapted. We're taking away their habitat. We're destroying where they live and the nature. And instead of going extinct, they're just learning to adapt and to live closer in proximity. And that's something that's maybe problematic to people, but it's really something to be admired about the species.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just agreeing. I was just going to say it's kind of the same thing with coyotes.
Sure.
Same thing. If they're out, they can be out during the day. It doesn't mean that they have distemper or rabies. I mean, if you see something wrong with it, it looks really sickly or something, then
right,
then you can be
different.
that's different. But they can be out in the daytime as well. And same thing. I mean, we've encroached into their territory as well, and they have adapted. I mean, people cannot believe that we have coyotes that come into. I mean, Tucson is a pretty. I don't know if they come into Phoenix. Well, maybe suburbs of Phoenix, but they come right into Tucson, into the city, into the streets and stuff. Maybe not right downtown, but all around out there in the outskirts you'll see them and stuff because they're adapting. They have to.
And they have to. Yeah. They can't live in wild because there is no wild left. So they've got to either die off or learn to live with us.
Yeah. Go ahead. And so the raccoons, and that's funny because you were talking about the garbage, and so they've gotten a nickname now too from people as trash pandas. So, for that, I have heard many people call them trash pandas.
Yeah, really. I won't use that here because I have had so many people, I've had so many kids orphaned because people shoot the moms and then they bring me the babies because they can't bear to shoot babies.
Oh,
but, and I say, well, what happened? Oh, she's getting into my trash. And it's like, well, that's not really fair, Secure your trash, you're putting out a buffet.
Yeah.
So I try not to associate them too much with garbage, but they are, it's a meal. They're going to eat it, and they're hungry. And you sort of can't blame them for trying to survive. And
well, and not only that, I mean, how many people feed the wildlife and then they entice them in and then they quit feeding them?
Right.
Too, so.
Or they get angry that they're coming too close, It's like, well, you gave them a warm spot and you fed them, so what
I know, that's where I'm at, trying to say, well, what do you think,
Right.
Yeah, I know.
That's what happens.
I think our game and fish, I think they can come after you if they catch you feeding the wildlife here in Arizona, because I mean literally you'll be, if you got to stop and think, when you're feeding some of the squirrels and like raccoons and stuff like that, now you're pulling in javelina and cougars and bobcats.
Yeah, sure.
So it's not a really good thing, but anyway, go ahead and look, what is their habitats? I mean, obviously we know we're encroaching, but what would their regular habitats be like, and how long do they live, and how many, and their offspring is called kits, correct?
Kits or cubs, you can use either or both. I tend to use kits, but some use cubs, but they're both acceptable. So let's see, the one thing that they need to be near is a water source. So they always stay near a stream or, some source of water. But they're, again, pretty, I think they're throughout the, all of North America as far as I know. So they have a sort of a diverse habitat. They tend to den in trees. Ours up here, we've got very snowy habitat, but they can pretty much adapt to wherever they are. The lifespan, again, I don't really know. It's really varied if you look it up. I mean, people say sort of 1 to 3 years in the wild, which seems crazy to me, but then you're mostly looking at, getting hit by cars or, diseases blow through. They certainly live, 8, 10, 12 in captivity, but I don't know about the, if you remove the human factor, probably the lifespan would be a lot longer, but they seem to say sort of 1 to 3 years in the wild. They do have litters, usually sort of 2 to 6 cubs or kits. One year I got a litter of 10 that had been orphaned, but that's a very unusually large litter. I think when they're younger, new moms tend to have smaller litter sizes than the more, moms who've had repeated litters.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, let's talk a little bit, their paws and their hands. Why are those so unique?
They're amazing. Their hands are like, it's just
I think so too.
Yeah, they are. There's just something about them, like it's just incredible. But they're really quite amazing. Raccoons rely tremendously on their sense of touch, and they have I think it's 4 to 5 times more mechanoreceptor cells than most mammals in their hands. So that's basically, the tactile ability to feel things and send information to the brain. So they identify things a lot by touching them. I think only primates and humans have up to that same level as a raccoon does. So that's why you'll see as soon as they are curious about something, they'll grab it and they'll dunk it in water, and then they'll start feeling it. And they often sort of are looking upwards and not looking at their hands because they don't rely as much on their vision, but they're just looking off the distance and they're rapidly touching something, and they wet their paws. They used to think, people used to say, they're washing their food or whatever, and they're not washing it. They're softening the pads of their hands because they are calloused enough that they can climb trees and do all these sort of things with them, but they soften them, and that enhances that tactile ability to sort of, feel and send all that information to their brain. So that's why they're so touchy. They grab anything, they just grab it, and they're rolling things around, but they always are just like, this rapid, like, touch, what is it, they turn it over, and, they have tremendous problem-solving abilities, and their intelligence is just incredible, and it's also really fed by that information that they're getting from their hands and how things work. They roll things around, so their hands are really, they rely just as much, I think, on that sense as any of their other ones for information gathering.
Well, and they have, like the little thumbs like humans and stuff, too, so they can hold things easier. Right?
They can hold. They don't have an opposable thumb, but they can certainly. They can. If they had opposable thumbs, they truly would have taken over the world. But yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Like we will, when we have our kits and we're raising them for release, we're trying to give them, they would spend their first year normally with their mother, and she would be taking them out and teaching them things. And so they're at a disadvantage when they come up in rehab because they don't have their mother out there showing them things in the world. But we try to give them as much enrichment and as much sort of skills, foraging, things like that they would need as skills when they go out into the wild. And we'll bring them like a kiddie pool full of crayfish or minnows or something, and it's amazing because they can stick their hands in, little babies will stick their hands in, and in one flash they've pulled the fish out. And it's immediate, and it's the first thing, and they can grab it just with one hand. And so they'll go, they're just incredibly fast with that grab and reach. It's amazing. It's amazing to see. But
that'd be awesome. Do you have any videos of that on your website at all?
Probably on the Facebook page. Probably there usually are some. Yeah, our spring and summer are our big busy times. So we're hoping this year to get a student intern who might want to take some social media for video for us, so that we can start getting some of this stuff out there, because we're all volunteer, and it's just a full-time job. And when we were very much just starting out, it was just me doing all the bottle feeding. So I remember at one point I was feeding something like 247 bottles a day. It was just like an endless, like round the clock, procession of bottles. So now that we have the interns and we've sort of expanded and we've gotten the programs up and running, now we have enough hands on deck that hopefully we'll be able to start getting a lot more recordings done and things that can really be used to educate people about these animals. And it's just so much fun to watch. I mean, they're incredible.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. And I'm going to talk about some more of your education training stuff here in just a minute too. So, masks. why are their masks more than actual just markings? I actually read on that. I was kind of surprised. It's more than just a marking. So what are the masks for?
Well, there's a camouflage element, certainly, and I think that one of the theories about them, of course, is that they're absorbing the light the way that, football players put that black under their eyes to help reduce glare and things to sort of help with the night vision. And every mask is unique, so there are also theories out there that they're using them to differentiate each other from sort of a distance, so that they kind of know each other. Yeah. What did you find that you were interested in?
Oh, it was about the absorbing the light. I had saw that. I never thought about that.
Yeah. And I still can't figure out the striped tail. I mean, everybody says, it's just like I guess so that you're, I guess it's a camouflage.
I was going to say it's some camouflage thing. I mean, if you see them in the wild and you're looking, if really their tail does kind of mix in if they're just sitting, in a bunch of brush or leaves and stuff like that.
They're like the wooded habitats, and they have a very beautiful silver tip to the top of their ears, and it's very distinctive. And when they are either getting defensive or aggressive, the ears fold back. And so I think that I read somewhere that they're using that also sort of as, signalment to the other animals that are out there, so you can sort of tell there's like no mistaking the mood they're in. So like if they want you to approach or not, you can watch those ears, and that silver kind of flashes, but then they can hide it if they're trying to, creep away. The ears go down and back, and the silver goes away. So it's kind of interesting.
No, maybe the wings is when they're in the trees and kind of mixing it. Maybe it mixes in with the bark of the trees a little bit more.
I think it must be, because I think like the ring-tailed lemur is the only other thing I can think of that has that ringed tail, and they would be tree dwelling, right?
Yeah, and we call them ring-tailed cats, coattamundi.
Yeah, I was going to say, and tabby cats, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a tabby cat right now. My tabby cat has rings on her tail.
Tabby cats do have rings on their tail. I mean, just I can think about it, but not as prominent, I don't think, as a raccoon's, but
no.
Yeah, that tail was something that was a prized possession of the trappers. That's for sure.
Yeah.
We already talked about, one of the traits that kind of gets raccoons into trouble. Are there any other ones out there that kind of tend to get them into more trouble than usual?
Well, they're really, really smart. So I think that is kind of a double-edged sword for them. It makes them really amazing, but I think it also makes them sort of threatening to some people. I don't know. It's interesting. My best friend was like horrified when she found out at first that I was going to be working with raccoons, because she was like, "Oh my God, I'm terrified of them." And I was like, "Really? Like, why? They're so amazing." Whatever. She had this story when she was young, that she had gone out and she had a compost heap or something, and there were a bunch of apples that were in the compost heap, and she went out one night to put some stuff in the compost, and there were all these raccoons there, and and they wanted the apples. And so instead of having this big crazy free-for-all where they were all running for the apples and fighting and wasting all their energy and everything, they were in a line, and the first one would take an apple and then go to the back of the line and eat it, and the next one would go up from the line and take their apple and go to the back, and they proceeded through to work through it. And so everybody got their apple, and nobody had to fight, and and it was shocking, but that level of thought actually scared her. She was like, "Oh my gosh, they're really organizing," and so I don't know. So apparently, being too smart can get you in trouble, but it also makes them very busy. So they get into things. They're very curious, and so they want to see sort of how things work and figure out their environment. So I think that means that and they're just adaptable and opportunistic. So if they have a chance to get into your attic where it's nice and warm and they don't have to worry about things, and I feel like you can tell the really intelligent animals by if they sense a threat, they pause for a minute and they evaluate what's going on. And I think maybe lesser intelligent animals maybe just sort of have a flash reaction or something. And so I think that they will choose, den sites in closer proximity to humans than some other species that would prey on their young are willing to go. So they kind of push the envelope a little bit because they're making a calculated judgment that they can get away from the human if they need to, and that it's worth it to keep, say, their young away from a great horned owl or something, and the owl isn't going to go as close or something like that. So I think they're using their intelligence to size up the fact that they feel that this is a relatively safe space, and they're willing to come sort of a little closer. So then, of course, you get the destruction of property, or you get, them into the garbage or things like that people aren't a fan of.
Right. And I don't know if it was off your site or just when I was looking at raccoons, I know I read that they wanted to try to do some, not bad experiments on them, but like teach them to do things, but they kept opening up the cages and getting out.
Oh, yeah. Yes. It was like in the 60s or 70s, they had figured out like how intelligent they were, and they wanted to measure them, and they wanted to measure the intelligence, and then they kept all the people in the lab kept getting really frustrated because they'd go in every morning and the raccoons had like broken out of the cages every night because they're just so, I'm like, well, that should make you want to study them more, not less. But they're like, oh, I give up,
I know, I thought that was so funny when I read that. I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah, my contractors are like, boy, if anybody ever needs quality control for like any object on Earth, just like give it to a raccoon, because we have this joke all the time. There'll be literally 6 of us standing around trying to figure out how to engineer something that the raccoon won't be able to figure out, and we'll spend weeks like problem solving. Like I wanted to do a feeder that somebody could feed from the outside, so that if I had to not be there, but it would be a drawer and it would be this and that. I mean, it's like we have yet to come up with a really good design that's effective, because every time we'll spend all this time and money and effort engineering something, and then they're like, yeah, no, and they're like, oh, cool, and they pull it out and it's broken. So we just they're very, very, very smart and persistent, and they're just problem solvers. They love a good puzzle. So I mean, that's another thing that's so fascinating, is that they've done all those studies where, the raccoons can replicate, if they solve something, they can replicate it for, years and years later, and they can, you can turn it upside down and they still recognize it and they still can solve it. And so when they do the sort of tests on them, they have amazing results, which is great.
Yeah, that story, I thought that was just great. I was like, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess the raccoon taught the researchers something, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Like, you can't cage us, buddy.
Nope. I mean, in New York State, we often complain about a lot of the regulations that they have around caging for raccoons, because they've made it very difficult to get your license to deal with them. But one of the requirements is a double-doored system, and that one I totally support. I'm like, yep, that one makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay. That was great. So, you guys, and you guys rehabilitate the orphaned and injured raccoons, but say, what if you have a raccoon that's injured to the point, you can save its life, but it's not going to be able to go back out into the wild? Do you guys end up letting it live out its life there at the center, or what happens then?
I do. We have one of very few, possibly the only, I'm not sure, but I think permits in the state right now for medically non-releasable raccoons. And they are used for educational purposes as ambassador animals for our rehab training program. So I'm trying to work with the state some more to get some broader sanctuary status. I work a lot I'm on the task force to try to revise the regulations in the state and get them a little bit more raccoon friendly, because we have a tremendous problem here with there's more animals than there are rehabbers, and so they get into trouble, and all the rehabbers are full, and members of the public end up taking them in and trying to raise them, and that's not good for the public or the animal. So we're really trying to work on more solutions. So I've been working with the DEC and Fish and Wildlife on trying to revise the regulations to allow some more of these, people to get rehab licenses, and to revise some of the regulations. So hopefully a sanctuary status will be on the horizon. But right now, yes, we do have a permit for the medical non-releasables. So we have a number of, amputees, or, we had one that was born with a vestibular condition. He can climb upwards, but he can't climb downwards. So if we had released him, he would have just gone out into the woods, climbed a tree, and starved to death. So he is now incredibly spoiled and living out his days here, and so we do have a permit for those animals, and we do keep them here. Yep.
Good. And a little bit ago we did touch on the rabies, pre-rabies shots and stuff like that, and you said that you guys, it's a requirement that you guys have to have the pre-shots as well.
Yes.
To work with them. So maybe you can explain a little bit more about what a rabies vector type of species is. And it's not, there's several different vector species, and the only reason they, I think, call them the vector species is because they, I think, are prone to get infected with rabies maybe more often than other species for whatever reason. But yeah,
and I think that's something that is defined differently, again, state to state. So in New York State, some states don't make the classification of a rabies vector because it's a little misleading, because basically any mammal can get rabies. Mm-hmm. So I think in New York State they base the definition on animals for whom a specific strain of the virus has developed for them to be the sort of host species or something, and also sort of the number of, the higher prevalence of incidence in that species than in others. Mm-hmm. So right now, for example, in New York State, raccoons, skunks, and bats are the three what the state is defining as a rabies vector species.
Same in Arizona. And fox.
Yeah.
We have fox too.
Yeah. Yeah, fox used to be on our list and isn't at the moment, but, it's always kind of one of those things we're flirting with coming back on, because it does, we do see it a lot in foxes, but it's really just sort of species that have I guess a somewhat higher incidence relative to the rest of the mammal population. Yep. Raccoons in particular can incubate the disease for a long time, and so again, that's one of those things that they've adapted well, and it's actually something that works out well for them, but becomes a problem to the rest of the population. But yeah.
Yeah, for us here, we see rabies more so in skunks and especially bats, because, we have the caverns and stuff here where a lot of the bats roost. So we tend to see more so with the rabies. We'll have a raccoon or a fox here and there, but you don't hear about those as much as we do the skunks and the bats here in Arizona having rabies. So
yeah. I would like to see more of the baiting programs, around. They're very successful with the baiting programs, and it would be very nice to be able to eradicate that disease.
Yeah, we do them here for the skunks and stuff. I'm not sure if they put them out for the raccoons and fox or not, but I know we do it for the skunks in certain areas around in Arizona. So. Yeah,
they've baited. Massachusetts and the Canadian border, and it's been very successful. So I would love to see the money put into just getting rid of that disease altogether.
yeah, exactly. Believe me, I know. I've did animal control. I know what that. Yeah.
You've seen it.
Yeah, I had a rabies epidemic in the area I worked for about a year. So.
Boy.
Yeah, it was crazy. I got to know the lab in Phoenix very, very well.
Oh, geez, yeah, it's a terrible disease.
Yeah, it is. And I was reading on the site too, but I'm having to tell listeners, why are necropsies important if an animal dies? Why would that be so important when it comes to...
So that's something that is kind of a personal passion of mine, is trying to help rehabbers to have the ability to get an animal sent in for necropsy if it dies in their care. And there's a lot of reasons why you would want to do that. It's something that historically rehabbers haven't had access to in New York State. You have to have a veterinarian submit it. So we worked really hard with them at Cornell, and they developed a program with us where we're now allowed to submit on behalf of other rehabbers around the state. So that was a really great thing for them to do, and that's something we're very proud that we're offering. So there's a lot of reasons why a rehabber would want to know what happened to the animals. Like if you something dies and you don't understand it. One of them, of course, is for quarantine and to understand what disease process has been in your facility, because there are a tremendous variation in ways to clean up after different pathogens. So if you're cleaning up, certain things can live in the environment for years, and bleach won't touch them, then you need a blowtorch to get rid of them. And certain things are really fragile, like rabies is a very fragile virus, so soap and water will basically take care of that, and being in the air for a couple days. So not knowing what you have, you could be you need to make sure that you can clean up properly, so that next year you're not putting babies back into situations that you think you've bleached them, but turns out that wasn't enough to kill whatever that pathogen was, and then you're just going to be reinfecting animals. It also, often an animal will die and there will be others left in care, and sometimes you can treat those animals, and there's a solution. If you know what disease you're dealing with, sometimes there's a treatment and you can save the rest of them. It's also helpful, a lot of these viruses out there in the world mutate, and they can present differently. So if you see an animal it comes in, it's exhibiting certain symptoms, and then it dies, you'll want to know in the future, gee, I've seen that before, or you see it again, and you want to know kind of what you're looking at. So you can't really do that if you don't have a diagnosis, other than say, oh, this isn't good. But, it would be nice to know sort of what you're dealing with. And it also, rehabbers play a really important role in disease surveillance, because we do see, a lot of things that come in before even some of the Fish and Wildlife, before things get on their radar. So it just helps build a really good general base of knowledge, for sort of what's out there in our environment.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was interesting when I was reading about that. I figured there was probably some pretty good reasons why you guys want to know. And cleaning up and stuff like that makes a lot of sense, because you just don't know.
Yeah, and rehab, it's very similar to a shelter environment. You've got, you're doing high volume of animals in a small space, and you really just sort of need to be as careful as you can not to be, bringing diseases around to other litters, and, working on your medical protocols. So
right, exactly. Never can be too careful. I mean,
nope.
When you're in the domestic shelter environment, it's the same thing, because you have dogs come in, they haven't been vaccinated, they can be sick, they can have parvo, they can have giardia, distemper. You just never know, and they can be shedding that virus and infecting the whole thing. And same thing, you've got to know what you have to clean with. And
absolutely.
I mean, for us, for the most part, a lot of times bleach will take care of it, but we do have.
Well, you got to leave it on there for 20 minutes if it's parvo,
Yeah,
so you don't know. And like, for example, parvo is a great example of that. Like, we're seeing a lot of parvo right now in raccoons, and it's not coming in presenting as the traditional GI issue. It's presenting with much less dramatic symptoms. It's got a longer incubation period, and then but we're able to bring them through with treatment. So if we lose one and we send it in for necropsy and they say it's parvo, then we can treat everybody else. We save them. They're all fine. They're releasable. But we also think, hey, wait, this is parvo. We don't want them to go out and shed it into the environment. So we will actually overwinter them until they're completely finished with the shedding period, and then we can send them out and know that they're not going to be putting it out, into the wild. So that's another reason why it's really good to understand the actual processes that are going through your facility.
Right, exactly. Dogs, I think, shed it for like 3 to 5 days before they really show signs of it and stuff. I didn't even know raccoons got parvo. That's interesting.
Yep. Unfortunately, raccoons are susceptible to both feline and canine diseases. So when we vaccinate here, we're giving, canine and feline vaccines, and of course rabies. So we're vaccinating with the whole host of stuff. we got to be, can't be too careful, but we do put them out there fully vaccinated. So
awesome. That's cool. Yeah, learn something new all the time.
There you go. This is a pretty fun line of work that you're in here, I imagine.
Yeah, well, this is more of a hobby, but I really enjoy it. Yeah, I really enjoy it, though, because I learn a lot of stuff all the time about different things, so it's really cool. So I love awesome. Doing it, so. And so I was going to ask you, too, what types of education training, do you have there at the center? You've already mentioned a couple things, like the baby boot camp, and you do internships and stuff. So is that kind of it, or do you offer other training, educational opportunities beyond those?
So we're kind of expanding that part of our program here. So we do the internships now. We're trying to expand some of those through different, we're doing some pre-vet track and some, vet tech and sort of other animal fields that can come in, and the baby boot camp. And we're also just sort of helping a lot of people navigate the licensing process and starting to sort of, work with just some general education and outreach there. I mean, I certainly give tours to people if they want to come over and stop by and talk about things. And we're working on getting some, recorded educational content out there. So it's that side of things is really growing. We really are sort of starting to become recognized as one of the sort of key raccoon places in the country, and there's sort of a handful of doing sort of large scale, more visible work, and we're also trying to build a database of medical knowledge about them. So we do pay for some viral sequencing. We're trying to work with them at the Wildlife Health Department at Cornell, trying to sort of figure out some of the diseases and issues facing these animals and how we can sort of better help them.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, you've mentioned, volunteers and stuff like that, so I'm assuming you take volunteers, and probably donations like a lot of other places do. Can you give the information for like your website or Facebook pages and stuff where people can, find out more information about the center or donate, or if they live near you, about volunteering and stuff like that?
Absolutely. So our website is www.gordonwildlife.org, and most of the information is listed there. Yeah, I mean, rehabbers really, they aren't allowed to charge for their work, and we all kind of rely on donations. It's a kind of a weird little niche area, so, we are a 501c3, we can apply for grants, but again, with that kind of funding, there's a small portion of grants that are designated for animal work, and the majority of those are for domestic animals, and so the small portion of that's for wild animals is mostly for endangered species. So you kind of take this animal that, many people consider a nuisance or that's not endangered, and, there's not a lot of funding opportunities out there, and when you're working with wildlife, there's no adoption fee. There's no way to recoup any of the expenses of all the money that you're putting in, right, feeding and vaccinating and tending these. So, rehabbers have a tough time making a go of it. So most centers are, including ours, are, supported and operating on donations and on a lot of volunteerism and our own, I'm not paid, Paul is not paid, we're not paid for the work that we do here. And I tell you, I work longer days at this than I ever did at any job I ever held anywhere else. But, we do it out of love and for the animals and for the future of the habitat and the wildlife in our state, but, and in our world. Right. But so it's a tough go, but it's just incredibly valuable work, and I will say, if you're interested in volunteering, the one thing that is required is that you do have to have those rabies pre-exposure vaccinations. The CDC did change the guidelines, so it's only 2 doses now as opposed to 3. But we do require those for anybody that wants to come here and handle the animals. But if you just want to come here and do other work or try to help us in other ways, we are always happy to talk to raccoon lovers and wildlife lovers and see if there's a way for people to fit here. So we'll use all the help that we could take, all the help that people can get. And I have noticed that raccoons in particular seem to draw really beautiful, open-hearted, fabulous, funky people. So we have quite a cool little army of raccoon weirdos we all are here. So it's great.
But they're cute, I mean, who can resist the cuteness?
They're amazing.
Even when they're bigger and they waddle around, even that's cute. So
Absolutely, and they're just funny. I mean, they surprise us all the time, especially our non-releasable population, who we get to know very well, and the things that they come up with. I mean, it's just, we're laughing all the time.
Oh, I'm sure.
The trouble they can get into. Oh my goodness, people say, "Oh, I want one as a pet," and I'm like, "Oh no, you don't." no.
That's go ahead. Sure.
It's a lot. They're just a lot. Yeah.
I had there's a chimpanzee sanctuary in Florida, and I had them on a while back, and we were talking about that because, people see these movies and TV shows where they got these nice, cute little chimps that they're carrying around in the little diapers and stuff, or the little outfits, and everybody, oh, they're so cute, I gotta have this. And people don't realize that those chimps grow to be like 6 feet tall.
Right.
And they are very muscular, very powerful, and could pretty much rip you apart if they so chose to do so. So.
Sure. and raccoons are, we obviously have non-releasables, so, they're not in our house, but they're in their own houses and enclosures there, and, I believe that they are living very happy, fulfilled lives, so I don't think that, the ones that we do release here have the choice. We're doing a soft release on our property much of the time, so they would have the ability to come back, and none of them ever do. So that tells me that they're choosing to be wild, even though they have the option to stay close. But the ones that medically cannot be released and that we're doing, I think that we're doing everything that we can to keep them, enriched and happy and living their best lives and supported, and I think they are those things, but it takes a tremendous amount of work and the ability to have them in something that you don't mind getting destroyed. And, I guess that they're just something that's that strong and intelligent and, excited about things is going to just wreak havoc. So, it takes a special person.
Yeah, and they're wild animals. If you find one out in the wild, a baby, I was telling you about this, my aunt had a couple raccoons when I was a kid that they found as babies, and they kept them to have them, as pets, and were trying to, raise them up and stuff. And did they save their lives? Yes. Did they get mean? Yes. So, she did eventually have to get them back out, after having them at her house for several months, and then now you got to take them back out to the wild, and it's like, are they going to, even really realize, because you've had them at your house for several months? But
sure.
You can't keep them.
And that's the problem, is that, there's a certain age when the little ones are, biologically basically programmed to follow whoever's in charge. So, if that's a person, they're going to just be looking to that person for guidance. And, it's very hard for people who aren't experienced with the species to not think that, oh, it loves me, it's got a special bond, it's just me. And, I'm sure that animal does, care about them and is sort of specially bonded to them at that moment, but it's also part of biologically where they are at that developmental phase, is that they are going to pick someone that is their surrogate mom, and they're basically going to follow that person, and that's not going to translate when their hormones kick in and they become adults when they're meant to be independent and they want to be released and they want to go out and breed. That's not going to be the same. It's not the same as a domesticated animal.
Right, and that's what I kind of mean. I mean, I don't mean like, oh my God, the thing was going crazy trying to attack them, but yeah, because that's what it wanted. It wanted to not be in that cage, and it was growing up and the hormones and all that stuff. And and they were a lot more than what my aunt was thinking when she.
Absolutely.
And I'm just, oh my gosh. So yeah, think twice, guys, before you decide to take in any wild animal. Think twice about it. Number one, especially if you find a baby alone or something, it does not always mean that the parents or mother or whatever is not around. They could be out foraging for food, or maybe there was a predator or something that they led off away from their babies. You just never know, and they're going to come back. So don't just immediately assume that baby is orphaned at that point. Give it a little time to see if the parents come back before you decide you're going to pick up the animal. And then before you pick up the animal, see if there's a rehabber like Sarah or somebody in the area that you can call and talk to before you do that, because there might be a certain way you need to pick that animal up or handle that animal to get to them. And you might need to know that you can't give them certain things. Like a lot of people think, oh, a baby animal, let's give it some milk. No!
Right. Yes, you will kill a baby raccoon if you give it cow's milk.
Yes.
So, and really calling your rehabber is key, because every species is different. The behaviors, rehabbers can identify whether something is liable to be orphaned and in trouble and tell you how to best give it a best chance at being reunited with its mother. And if it does need to go into care, it needs to go into the care of someone who is a professional and who understands, the needs of that species and how to best, prepare it to go back out into the wild. These animals really aren't meant to be pets. They're first generation, wildlife. They need to be wild. So that's really...
Exactly. And that's, and even the ones you have at your sanctuary with medical necessity, you still are giving them that semblance of a wild type of life, even though they're kept, there because they can't make it on their own, but they still get to be, what they're meant to kind of be. So
yeah, they're not coming in as pets, and it wouldn't have been my first choice for them. Of course, I wanted them all to be perfectly happy and adapted and healthy and able to go back out. Right. In the way we've released hundreds over the years, and that's the life I would have rather them had, but they didn't have that choice, so we give them the best we can.
Yep, exactly. So, well, Sarah, this is pretty much the end of the podcast. I really appreciate you coming on tonight and giving us all this awesome information about raccoons and telling us all the cool stories you told us and laughing. It was a really good discussion about them, and hopefully everybody out there listening or that's going to be listening learn some more things about them and about how much fun they can be and what to do if they actually do find one. So,
well, I'm so grateful to you for your interest and for having me on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd love to. It was a great discussion. So, but I'm going to let you know, I'm just going to announce my next coming up podcast for the next month. And I know it's late your time. If you want to jump off, you are more than welcome to jump off, or you can stay on and listen to what I'm going to be announcing. That's up to you. But that's what I'm going to be letting my listeners know, is just about those next ones.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lori. Great thing you're doing.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it. You have a good one.
Take care. You too.
All right. Bye. All right, everybody. Here goes Sarah. That was a great podcast, huh, guys? I really enjoyed learning more about the raccoons and all those fun things and everything. So, but now on to the next thing. So my next upcoming podcast, March 6th is the next one, and I'm going to have Shannon Malone de Benedictus, I'm hoping I said that correctly, on the podcast. She's actually producer-director. She's been involved with like National Geographic documentaries, things like that, and quite a few, and not just National Geographic, other animal types of documentaries and stuff like that too. She's produced, directed, and been involved with. And so Shannon's going to join me, and we're going to talk about what it's like to be a woman, producer, director, entrepreneur in the field, and making these types of documentaries, and what it was like to make these documentaries about all these really cool animals that she was working on. To let us know more about, I guess you might say, and I'm not saying that correctly, I know, but anyway, so she'll be on and give us more info about working on all those really cool documentaries about animals, and I'm looking really forward to that. I think it's going to be an awesome podcast, and learning so much, about what she does is going to be really cool. So I'm looking forward to speaking with her. And then the next one in March is going to be on March 20th, and I'm going to have an author on with me named Jane Sharp, and we're going to be talking about her book called Winston the Cat with a Mech Suit. And she wrote this story as a children's story. She's a children's author. And she's actually got quite a few different books and stuff out there for kids. But anyway, this one here is about Winston the cat, and how in the book the family, or he's imagining how much more help he can be for them if he has a mech suit that he can get around in to help them. So anyway, it was kind of a cool little kid story. I looked it over. I think my granddaughters would enjoy it. So I think you guys will enjoy it. And she's going to come on anyway on March 20th and tell us more about her book and why she wrote it about Winston, what was her inspiration for Winston, and why she wrote about the cat and really a mech suit. I thought that was kind of interesting. So guys, those are the next couple of podcasts that I have coming up in March, and looking forward to them. And again, I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast tonight with Sarah about the raccoons. And with all of that being said, I hope you guys all have a very safe and wonderful weekend. Don't get into too much trouble out there, and don't forget to come on back in a couple weeks and listen to the next podcast. Unfortunately, my podcast host has done away with a lot of my live, they've done away with live podcasts completely, just letting you guys know. So I don't have them live anymore, unfortunately. They'll all be recorded. And I'm going to keep the same times for the recordings on Thursday nights at 6 p.m. But me doing the podcast from 6 to 7, and then having to get it published, and if we go over any, or if I need to do any kind of editing, I'm not going to be able to get it up and published and ready to listen to until at least 8 o'clock that evening, Arizona time, Mountain Standard. It would be, depending on daylight savings time, it could be 10 or 11 p.m. Eastern, and Pacific Daylight Time, you're in summertime. After the time switches in March, you're on our time, or my time as well. So Pacific Daylight Time in the summer will be the same time, 8 p.m. Otherwise, you guys are looking at an hour earlier, which would be more like 7 p.m. when I get it up and ready. So anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know that that's what's going on. I'm not sure if I'm going to change my hosting platform because of this, because I do like the live shows, but I also like my host platform and all the things that they give me on it. So again, just wanted to make you all aware, if you didn't see it when I posted it on Facebook and when I posted it in my descriptions here, the podcast is no longer live, and it won't be getting published out until 8 p.m. Mountain Standard, and which is 10 or 11 p.m. Eastern Time. So, sorry about that, guys, but that's how it goes. All right. And you guys have a good night, and hopefully you'll be back in a couple weeks. Bye now.